Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Couch GMs podcast on Tuesday, October 19th, 2021. I'm your host, George Kerth, joined by Cody Roadcap. And Cody, it is week 7 already.
I know, week 7 already. It feels like the season is flying by. I guess on the bright side is we get an extra game. So
It's
there's
really week
still,
6.
yeah, it's essentially week 6. We still have, over 10 games to go, plus playoffs for the teams that make it. So it feels like it's flying by, but it still is only the middle of October, and we have all the way till February. So still a lot of football left.
Thank you for making me feel better because I feel like it's flying by, like you said. But the people are here to talk some fantasy, so we got some news and notes to look at for this week. We're going to give you some week 7 waiver wire. You can also check out my waiver wire column on thecouchgms.com. And a little bonus this week, we're going to talk some streaming quarterbacks and defenses because there's a lot of key buys coming up in week 7. With no further ado, why don't we jump into some NFL news? The NFL news this week is still primarily owned by injuries because it doesn't stop. Please make it stop. Let's start off with Dak Prescott, quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys, who injured his calf on the final play of the Cowboys game in week 6. Good news, Cowboys have a bye in week 7, and they think that he will be back for week 8. Obviously, it's going to be a wait-and-see scenario, but could be very important if Dak misses time on that Cowboys team.
For sure. I mean, it was a heck of a game by the Cowboys and the Patriots. I think the Patriots made it a lot closer than people expected. It sucks that he hurt his play on the last play of the game, but it was the game-winning play. And like you mentioned, they do have a bye, and it is expected, and the team is optimistic he will get back there. But Dak is putting up an incredible comeback season, the front runner for comeback player of the year. The Cowboys look like a legit team, and they cannot afford to lose the guy under center.
Definitely. And obviously, we won't be talking too much about it this week, but we'll keep you updated next week on his injury status and how it will affect your Cowboys' weapons in fantasy if he does happen to miss a game or two. I think we have to move on then to news that happened on Saturday, actually, before the Sunday games. That'd be Christian McCaffrey was placed on injured reserve. I know we were talking on Thursday about they were really concerned if he was going to be somebody that was going to be a bust again this year because of the injury. Well, the Panthers decided to shut him down, try to get him completely healthy, not rush him back. We'll see if it actually helps. But don't forget, even though he missed now 3 weeks, he still has to miss another 2 because the injured reserve is not retroactive as it would be in baseball or something like that. He has to miss 3 games from the time he was placed on injured reserve.
Correct. So he'll be out a total of 5 weeks with this injury. Hopefully after that, he can come back and be dominant. We even encouraged possibly exploring trades on the show last week. Maybe you were fortunate enough to pull the trigger, get someone to jump before he hit the IR on Saturday. It didn't look good when he went out of the game. They instantly ruled him out. It's just been a whole odd situation because, 2 weeks later, he was like, oh, I'm definitely playing. I'm definitely going to be back.
Mm-hmm.
He was 50-50 to go, and then apparently he had a setback, and he now finds himself on IR. A tough break for everyone that drafted CMC this year, but hopefully for football's sake and fantasy sake, we do get to see him in the second half of the season.
Definitely. He actually got me before that setback. I dropped Chubb Hubbard in our league of record, got him back on the second round of waivers in the week, luckily. So I'm going to have a hold on to him as another running back handcuff I keep scrapping for. Speaking of running back injuries, we also had a similar situation with Chris Carson happen last week because we were talking about him and his neck injury and being concerned about him being fully healthy. The Seahawks shut him down for 3 weeks. So there's another injury in that backfield too with Alex Collins. We can talk about that later when it comes to running back handcuffs, but Carson was officially shut down. It's another big blow for people who drafted him early.
Yeah, and unfortunately, Chris Carson's dealing with a pretty significant neck injury. And anytime you're talking footballs and neck injuries, they don't really go hand in hand. Obviously, I'm not a doctor. George is not a doctor. And a ton of the people on Twitter are not a doctor. But there are some rumblings from some beat reporters and, other guys that have been around the league that are starting to question if Chris Carson will ever play football again. Now,
Wow.
hopefully, it is not that serious. But like I said, neck injuries change careers. We've seen it with a few players. I know everyone's going to talk about how Peyton Manning, he had to take the year off because he had to get the surgery. But there's been other players. Obviously, I'm a Packers fan. So Jonathan Franklin, a running back, you probably have no idea who that was. He was a fifth round pick out of UCLA many years ago. He had a neck injury. He never played again. He ended up becoming a scout for the team. It's Jermichael Finley. He had a huge neck injury for the Packers, cut his career short, and probably the most devastating for the Packers. I mean, they were all devastating. You never want to see a player's career end that way. But Nick Collins, the up and coming safety that was on pace to have a Hall of Fame career, his career ended in a flash off of a neck injury. Necks are not something you can play with. Hopefully, Chris Carson can get back. We're all hoping for him here at the Couch GMs, but just something to keep in mind. Even though the IR rule is, you can bring him back after 3 weeks. 3 weeks doesn't guarantee that's when the player will be back.
Definitely. And if we hear anything in the news of that backfield, we'll let you know. Moving on, then, we have a couple of Cleveland Browns to talk about as well. We know they did not play Nick Chubb in week 6. But outside of that, in week 6, they had injuries again to Baker Mayfield. We'll start with him. He dislocated his shoulder again. It seems like this is going to be something that just keeps happening. He says he's going to keep playing through it, and he says it feels awful.
Yeah, I believe. I mean, I'm no doctor, but it reminds me of a lot. If you're a baseball fan, and I'm not even the biggest baseball fan, but we saw it all season long with the Padres star Fernando Tatis. He every time he slid into third base, he was popping that shoulder out of place, and he would. It seems like anytime you get hit hard, I mean, it happened on Sunday again. His shoulder popped out; they had to pop it back into place. He was able to go. Um, you know, one thing's for sure: you cannot question Baker Mayfield's toughness. He's out there slinging it. He's trying, and honestly, he's the best shot for the Browns. I still think a banged up Baker Mayfield is better than Case Keenum long term for Cleveland. So I think he's going to give his heart out. And he also, don't forget, he is a young quarterback looking for a new contract. He was in the same class as your Josh Allen, who just got his monster deal. He was the first overall pick. He's hoping that Cleveland ends up paying him the big bucks, and playing through this injury and help leading this team is a big way to make that happen.
Definitely. And it's important to note also this injury is his non-throwing shoulder. So it's going to be a more of a pain tolerance issue than anything. It shouldn't affect his game too much. I mean, it'll affect his game somewhat because it's obviously uncomfortable and you're still using that arm a little bit, but non-throwing shoulder, if it was throwing shoulder, it'd be a completely different story. And then they also, speaking of the running back room, I mentioned Chubb earlier. They had Kareem Hunt, who started the game, left the game with what looked to be an extremely serious lower leg injury. I thought it was an Achilles. Luckily, it is another sort of calf injury. Not so luckily, he is expected to miss 4 to 6 weeks is the indication. Minimum 3 is probably going to be put on the injured reserve this week.
For sure. Like we said, thankfully the Cleveland Browns are on bye. You hate to see this for Kareem Hunt, another guy playing
They're
really
not on
well.
bye. They play Thursday.
Oh, that's right. They play Thursday. I was getting ahead of myself for some reason. I mean, there's so many teams on bye this week. You would think that this would be one of them. So I apologize. They are right. 100%. They are not on bye. But he'll still most likely hit the IR. I don't think Nick Chubb's going to play Thursday. I mean, we're going to talk about it a little bit when we preview the Thursday night game at the end of the show. But guys, I know we're going to talk about waivers. Demetric Felton. I talked about him last week. This guy I really liked. I know it's a little fifth round pick, wide receiver, running back, but he was involved. Hopefully Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb can make it back though, because let's be honest, that Browns team relies heavily on those two to make it work. And you don't want to see any injuries for anybody. Like all these guys, it sucks talking about they're injured, and you just want them all back as soon as possible.
Definitely. All we can do as fantasy players is keep grabbing everyone off the waiver wire who will actually be involved and keep praying that everyone will get healthy soon enough. But I think that we can take a break from some injuries and have a little bit of fun with my favorite segment, Quotes of the Week. Cody has a couple of fun quotes to add in this week, but I'll start it off for us here. We have a Cam Newton sighting in the press this week. He was appearing on, I believe it was his own podcast, but do not quote me on that. I'll go back to his situation when he was released from the Patriots back in September, when he was released because, quote, he was going to be a distraction. Now he has come back after taking a little bit of time to cool off. He called the Patriots situation a misunderstanding of COVID protocols, and asking when if he still wants to play football, he said, heck yes, I still want to play football. I still get that urge to go out there and perform and do something that I've been doing since I was 7 years old. So I don't know if Newton's going to get the shot this year. He may, because there's some teams that are quarterback needy in the injury department, but the drive is still there for Cam Newton.
Yeah, there's some teams I'd be interested to see if he gets a call. It's probably going to take an injury or two for him to get there. I mean, I feel like we talked about a lot of injuries, but knock on wood for everyone out there. Quarterbacks have been pretty successful of staying healthy. I'm knocking on wood because I don't want to see any injuries to quarterbacks, and it's probably going to take an injury for him to get another look. But now that he is vaccinated, I think that's a huge part of this, even though everyone denied that at the time he was released. I could see him hopping onto a practice squad if that's something he's willing to do. Cam Newton also does seem like the guy that, hey, if I'm coming in, I want to compete to start, and maybe he won't be willing to take a practice squad role just to get back on the team. I don't know that for sure, though, so maybe I'm completely wrong on Cam Newton. That's just the vibe I got from the way he's went out and played so far.
It's very true, and we'll probably find out in the coming weeks, because if everything's kind of blown over, there's a good chance that teams are going to start giving him a look. So we'll see if there's any news of him working out for anybody, maybe even platching onto a practice squad. We can move on to a team who's having some quarterback issues, and that would be the Detroit Lions. Their new head coach, Dan Campbell, said, quote, Goff needs to step up more than he has. And I respond, where's Tyler when you need him?
But George, Jared Goff is just as good as Matthew Stafford.
Not quite.
Now, if Tyler was here, he would tell you, I would say, I don't think Jared Goff is Matt Stafford is that much better than Jared
You're
Goff.
right. That is his response.
That's what he would say, and then he would probably argue that, like, who do the Lions have as pass-catching options? The Lions are a bad team. The Rams are a good team. They're all valid opinions, but Jared Goff, the coach called him out. He needs to step up a little bit more, and I guess we'll see if they can not be the first team to go 0 and I guess now 16,
17,
or 0 and 17. I always get the number 0 and 17, and the second team to have a completely losing season. I'm not ready to say that for the Lions yet. They've been in a lot of close games. I think they start to pull out some victories as we go down the stretch. But there's two quotes that I have to talk about, and I'm taking over your segment.
Okay.
I know this is your segment. I'm taking over these two quotes.
Do it.
This is not a team that needs a quarterback. This team has a quarterback. This team played the Chicago Bears in week 6. They played the Chicago Bears 27 times in this guy's career. He has a 22-5 record. Aaron Rodgers rolls out, pump fakes, makes the guys miss, hits the end zone, looks up to the crowd in Soldier Field and he says he saw a female, but there is photos out there of multiple people giving him the middle finger, and he yells back, I've owned you all my effing life. I own you. I still own you, as he celebrated his touchdown. And let me tell you, Packers fans went crazy. Pat McAfee went crazy. People on Twitter, NFL personalities, they're like, where's this cocky? This is cocky Aaron Rodgers, but this is what everybody loves about Aaron Rodgers. And he has a point. He's 22-5 all time against the Chicago Bears. Like, is this a rivalry anymore? Like, that's what we're talking about. Like, this, it's crazy. I think he even mentioned it since Brett Favre took over. Like, the Bears had like a 20-game lead on the all-time record that now the Packers have overtaken the all-time record. So they've been unstoppable against the Bears. The Bears have gotten a few wins, but Aaron Rodgers lit the fans up, got everybody hyped when he gave that dagger in Chicago. But there was actually another quote that is not getting talked about nearly enough, or maybe, it could just be a post-game quote that nobody mentions. But after the game, everybody's talking about the I own you quote. But he was asked, did you think about this before the preseason game, or before the game, or in the pregame before the game against the Bears that this could be your last game at Soldier Field, a part of the Packers-Bears rivalry. And he responded, I don't think this is my last one, but I've enjoyed every single one of them. Now, it seems like he like realized what he said and maybe covered himself by saying, I've enjoyed every single one. But after this whole offseason, to hear him say, I don't think this is my last one in Green Bay. If you thought last offseason was wild, buckle up, Green Bay fans. It's about to get crazier.
I am excited. I'm not excited for football to end, but I'm excited for this offseason to see Rodgers Watch Part 2, to see, is he going to
Cody
sign a
cried.
contract? Is he not? Cody go through the roller coaster of emotions of the he's coming back, maybe he's not coming back. There's this trade proposal out there. This contract's apparently close. I am excited to see what happens. This is the kind of drama that makes the NFL so appealing to a lot of us fans, and it's even outside of the game. But that first quote, just to go back really fast, that caught me by shock at first, but when I saw the crowd reaction, I am glad he did it.
Hey, he was just spitting facts, is what the young people say.
Oh, okay. Is that what that so I'm not hip, so I didn't think of that, right?
Well, I don't know. I just turned 27, so I feel like my life's pretty much over. So at this point, I guess that's what the young people say.
Man, it's bad being old.
For real, for real. But I think that's enough for quotes of the week. Let's hit in to some of our favorite waiver wires heading into week 7.
As we all know, the fantasy waiver wire gets a little bit more sparse as we start getting farther into the season. But I think the important thing to talk about when we're talking about the waiver wire right now, comb through your league's waiver wire and see if any of the handcuff running backs for these guys that are hurt are still out there. I'll just throw a couple names out there. You can check them out on the couchgms.com as well. For Carolina, you got Chubb Hubbard. Chicago, either Damian Williams or Khalil Herbert. We have to see what happens with Damian Williams and the COVID status, but both may end up being relevant. Kansas City, Darrell Williams. Seattle, Alex Collins, and if he's dealing with injury, we also have Rashad Penny. And then the Giants, Devontae Booker. So they're all more highly owned, but they are available in some leagues. Please make sure you're combing through your waiver wire and see if any of these guys who are startable are sitting out there waiting for you.
Yeah, that's some great advice right there. You can never have enough running backs on your roster. Obviously, there's a reason they're out there. It's either injury related or they're not as good as the guy that they're replacing. That's why they're not currently owned. But like George mentioned, it's always important to not only check your waiver wire going into the week, but if there's not a guy that you love on your waiver wire, and this doesn't take much effect if you're playing Fab, but if you're playing waiver priority, skip out. You never know who someone might drop to get a handcuff or something like that. It's always good to shop your waivers essentially and get you a higher priority for that second round, especially as we get into these weeks. Guys that people don't like. Like I'm sure there's a tons of Myles Gaskins owner that Myles Gaskins going to hit the open market in a ton of leagues, and maybe it's because I've been bullish on him all season. We saw 1 week of him putting up solid fantasy numbers. I think eventually they'll get back to that. He's a guy I'm holding onto while other players might. Those are the kind of guys that you need to, check your waiver wires. I know in our league, Brandon Ayuk got cut last week. Maybe he might bounce back after the bye. They might have finally got him going. They've had time to, work with them in season. So don't always be, going out there and making sure you have to get Khalil Herbert when Damian Williams might come back. Maybe wait it out and see who gets dropped. That's some advice. 2 other handcuffs you should at least know about is Latavius Murray. He did injure himself on the game. It's not supposed to be serious, but he might miss a week or 2. And that's just another hit to the Ravens running back. It could be the reemergence of Tyson Williams now that Latavius Murray is gone. But they have gotten into Devontae Freeman and Le'Veon Bell. He even got into the end zone, I believe, the last 2 weeks. So they're using them. So it's still a cloudy mess after Latavius Murray there. But those are some guys that, later in the week you might want to add, on a speculative. And then on a complete side note, I am all for the running backs and wide receivers and linebackers wearing single digits. I like it. I know a lot of people hate it. But who thought it was a good idea to give Latavius Murray 17? Or not Latavius Murray, Le'Veon Bell.
Le'Veon Bell,
Sev
yeah.
17. I was like, 17? I mean, I know the dude can catch out of the backfield, so he's practically a wide receiver. But I
I
was
mean,
like,
he was trying to get his contract years ago saying, "I'm a wide receiver. I need wide receiver money."
So maybe he's still thinking it's the old numbers and he's trying to play a little wide receiver with that number 17. Just that caught my eye on Sunday when he scored, and I was like, wow, 17. That's an interesting number to pick for a running back. I do like the single digits though, and you won't expect. I like it for linebackers too. I know there's a lot of people that don't like it, but 17 for a running back, I think, is the weirdest one I've seen on the season. And then there was one other guy I wanted to talk about as a potential pickup, but I forgot about it going off of Le'Veon Bell. So George, I'll let you talk and see if it comes back to me.
I think I know who it is. I'm going to try to guess, and that would be
Okay.
Demetric Felton.
Well, of course. I mean, I did talk about Demetric Felton. There was one other. Oh, I got it. It wasn't Demetric Felton.
Okay,
This is a
we'll
guy.
come back to Felton after you're done here.
Yeah, we'll come back to Felton. But two other. They're not. He's not. They're not quote unquote handcuffs yet. But two guys to consider is Ronald Jones has probably been cut by this point, because, and if not, will this week after Leonard Fournette's um, potential are taking over,
Mhm.
and Marlon Mack. We have 15 days till the trade deadline. They're the two hot names that are about to be traded to, or have interest, or other teams have at least called about. I'm gonna tell you right now, if Marlon Mack ends up in Baltimore, I'm picking him. Marlon Mack's still a good player. You know, there's been some talks of him linked to Kansas City. Yeah, that's a little bit murky because Darrell Williams looks good. Clyde Edwards-Helaire isn't out for the whole season. So that they all depend on where they might end up. But those are two guys that have fantasy relevance experience, have NFL experience, that might not be worth an ad, especially if you have a deeper bench. You've had a couple guys hit the IR and you just rather take a flyer um, with only 2 weeks left until the trade deadline. And then after 2 weeks, if they don't get traded, you cut them. And it's no harm, no foul. So just something to think about. But yes, now is the time we can talk about Demetric Felton. I will express my love for this man again. He had an incredible play in the Senior Bowl. I've been following him since then. He was a guy I desperately wanted in the green and gold. I am still rooting for him down in Cleveland. And we mentioned it. They're dealing with injuries. Now, again, they play Thursday night. If both the running backs are out, I think you could throw Felton out there. Some people will tell you Dearness Johnson. We saw him have a predominant role last year when both the injuries, but I like Felton out of the backfield, especially in half point PPR and full point PPR, if Chubb and Kareem Hunt can't go. Now, with it being a Thursday night and 10 days rest, they might get Chubb back the following week. So it might only be a 1 week start because once Chubb is back, maybe he'll fit that Kareem Hunt role. I don't know if you can expect the same amount of points total. He might be a decent flex option depending on the matchups. But yeah, I think Demetric Felton is probably my favorite waiver wire target this week.
Definitely one of my favorites. I would agree with that. We obviously have to keep an eye on what happens with Nick Chubb. I don't know how serious the Chubb injury is because it was all down talk last week and all of a sudden he's out. So chance you see him Thursday. Chance if you see him Thursday, he's really limited too, and Felton might still be a good play. We'll keep you updated on that injury report, and we can talk a little bit more about this when we get to our Thursday night preview later in the show. I want to move on to wide receivers. There's a couple that I had on my waiver wire article on the couchgms.com. First one is someone that may be a little bit of a speculative ad because there is another injury he's dealing with. That's T.Y. Hilton. He came back for the first time in week 6. He got his first snaps with Carson Wentz. Only saw 4 targets, but turned in 80 yards. That's traditional T.Y. Hilton making big plays. And Carson Wentz likes throwing the ball down the field. So if he's healthy, he could end up being somebody that can be one of those long shot, you need a big game, put in T.Y. Hilton and hope kind of guys.
Yeah, he could be that. But it's also worth noting that Paris Campbell suffered a pretty significant injury. He'll be out some time. So again, if you haven't picked up Michael Pittman yet,
Yeah,
please pick up Michael Pittman. If he's out
it should
there,
be Pittman and T.Y.
and honestly, with Hilton dealing with yet another injury because he, a soft tissue injury because he came back off of IR and he hadn't really played. He tweaked something. He's getting up there in age. Michael Pittman seems to be the guy for Indianapolis. As I know, he might not always have the big play ability. He's more of a possession type of guy. He'll probably see, more of the targets. You're hoping for a touchdown. He might not put up a 70-yarder, but he still seems to be a solid guy in Indy. And before you give me your next wide receiver, I do want to throw one more thing about the running backs that I forgot to mention.
Okay.
We talked about Chris Carson hitting the IR. Alex Collins got a little banged up on Sunday Night Football. And Pete Carroll did say on Monday that Rashad Penny is expected to come off the IR. Now, we've been here before with Rashad Penny. He was a former first round pick. He's had high expectations. The dude can't stay healthy, but he's another guy. He might not be on your waiver. Someone might not have willingly put them in their IR spot. We saw Alex Collins look good, and Seattle is going to rely on the running backs. That's what Pete Carroll does. So if Collins can't go or is limited, Rashad Penny, he could be another one of those handcuffs that you might want to own, or just get out of it a week. Put him on your roster. I'm not saying to put him in your lineup, but put him on your roster. See how he performs coming back from injury. But that's it for running backs. You got any other wide receivers for us?
I got one more, and it's someone we talked about a little bit last week because we're always playing Arizona wide receiver roulette, and AJ Green again showed up. And I said I liked AJ Green because of his red zone efficiency and how many targets he's getting in the red zone. Another 3 targets in the red zone for AJ Green results in another touchdown. He may be a little bit of a sketchy play. He may be touchdown dependent, but he's getting the chance to score that touchdown pretty much every week.
Yeah, I like it. There's not many, Arizona options I don't like. Like you said, it's going to be so hit or miss on which guy outside of DeAndre Hopkins is worth, the wide receiver 2 flex spot. But AJ Green's up there, like you mentioned. He's getting the red zone targets. And another guy from Arizona you might want to consider adding this week is newly acquired tight end Zack Ertz. I know it was a tough day for Eagles fans to see him go, but the time has come. Um, and Max Williams was carving out a nice role for him. I know Zach Ertz has taken a step back athletically since he was a few years ago, but I still think he is about as athletic and can move around decently well. He can fit right in on that offense. And honestly, we talk about it. It's a dartboard for tight ends. And I, I love Dawson Knox. I love Dalton Schultz, who aren't the best tight ends, but they're on high-powered offenses. Yes, some weeks there's not enough to go around for them. And Zach Ertz fits right into that category. He could be a guy
Mhm.
that if you're missing out on a tight end, if you don't have Darren Waller or Travis Kelce, and really those are the only 2 locks at tight end. Mark Andrews has finally come around, but we saw the first 3 games of the season, he was barely putting up any points. That's just the tight end market. So go for a tight end like Zach Ertz, who's on a high-powered offense and has the potential to put up, 1, maybe 2 touchdowns a game.
Definitely. The only downside is Zach Ertz is slightly more owned than he would have been if it wasn't the circumstance of Dallas Goedert hitting the COVID list, and Ertz started for the Eagles last Thursday. Some people snatched him up, so he was at 44.3% owned in NFL.com leagues coming into this waiver period. But there is somebody else that I like at tight end this week. If you're going to miss out on a Zach Ertz, if you missed out on like a Dalton Schultz or a Dawson Knox a couple weeks ago, and I'll be the first to admit I was wrong a couple weeks ago when Cody was asking me about Ricky Seals-Jones. Ricky Seals-Jones has really carved out a role. Cody said he liked how he got 6 targets last week, and then he came out and I believe got 10 this past week now. And he got a touchdown. He looks like he's taking all of Logan Thomas's work. They're confident using him the same. And until Logan Thomas comes back from his injury, he's pretty high on the dartboard for me.
Hey, all I'm going to say to that is, I told you so.
Yeah, you
And
did.
this week he gets the Green Bay Packers, which I don't have their actual stats in front of me of where their defense ranks against fantasy tight ends. But boy, is that secondary banged up. They have Eric Stokes, their first round rookie, which I believe will most likely shadow Terry McLaurin this week. Whether that's a good thing or not, it's wait to be seen. But after that, we saw Darnell Savage leave the game with an injury. I mean, Amos is still there. Their linebackers haven't been great in pass coverage, especially outside of DeAndre Campbell. This could be another big week, and he and Tyler Heineke have something there that I'm interested to see how this progresses after next week when we expect Logan Thomas to come back? Does this become a tight end split? Do we lose out on 2 tight ends now? Does Logan Thomas come back and get everything? Uh, but again, if you need a spot start, and trust me, there is a ton of buys in week 6, or excuse me, week 7. There's gonna be a lot of openings. I know in our league of record, I have 7 people on bye. I don't even know how I'm gonna field a full team. Like, I'm already planning to play without a kicker and a defense because I can't cut my whole bench. That's not feasible. Just chalk
No,
up the L. Congratulations, Marcus, you got a victory. Um, but that's what I'm saying.
don't talk to me about Marcus and victories right now.
I'm sorry. But Ricky Seals-Jones, definitely a guy
Yeah,
you should go out and add.
definitely. And we're talking a lot of buys next week. So I think it's good for us to take a little extra time this episode to talk about a couple of quarterbacks and defenses that you can stream this week to fill some of those bye weeks.
For sure, George, quarterback streamers. We talk about this a lot during draft season, how, it's often better to wait on a quarterback, um, because sometimes you're going to want to stream guys that go undrafted or, aren't great every game, but are in just plus matchups.
Mhm.
And, I'm going to start with a guy that, didn't look great, but has at the beginning of the season, he injured both of his ankles and has looked fantastic the last 2 weeks, putting up points. And that's Carson Wentz. Now, they do play San Francisco, but this is not the San Francisco defense of a few years ago. Their front four is really good. I'm not arguing that, but their secondary is a little less to be desired. The Colts have a decent offensive line. I know they're missing Quentin Nelson, but their offensive line is still good. They're using Zach Taylor in more than just the running game. They're adding him to the pass game. Carson Wentz is putting up points over the last 2 weeks. I look for that to continue this week. And you should feel pretty confident because I believe San Francisco's 25th ranked against quarterbacks. That's a very plus matchup. And if, like I mentioned, I think we should just real quick, let me just I know we're going to talk about this on our Friday show, but the Buffalo Bills, that's Josh Allen. Dallas Cowboys, that's Dak Prescott. Los Angeles Chargers, that's Justin Herbert. Minnesota Vikings, that's uh,
Kirk Cousins.
Captain Kirk. Thank you. I couldn't remember his last name for some reason. And then you have Ben Roethlisberger, who hasn't been great except like the one game last week. So that's nothing. And then Trevor Lawrence, who hasn't been a terrible streaming option in some matchups. That's the bye weeks. There is some huge fantasy points that are going to be missing in week 7. So that's what we're saying. These quarterbacks, they're not guys who are going to want to hold on to your roster, but they're plus matchups. You got to take advantage of it, especially if you're missing out on a Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, or Dak Prescott.
Definitely. And I'm going to move us on to our next player, somebody who just came back from injury and looked very good over in London against the Jaguars. And that would be Tua going up against another good matchup in the Atlanta Falcons. So Tua put up over 20 fantasy points as a quarterback last week. He was somebody that did not look too impressive in his first start, and then he ended up getting injured and missed every week until this past week. But him and Jalen Waddle also looked fantastic. They looked like they were back in college again, just throwing the ball around the yard. So if you're going to start seeing Tua, being allowed to throw the ball more, still able to use his legs, and in a matchup against Atlanta, he's definitely somebody that you can go out there and target to fill in this bye week. And not saying he's going to be a long-term fill either, but he's somebody you might want to watch to hold on your bench in case anything does break out. He's a young guy. He could end up showing his potential now.
Yeah, I love the nod to Tua. Again, he's not spectacular, but he plays Atlanta, who has been very susceptible to quarterbacks, giving up a ton of points. Surprisingly, Tua threw 47 passes in London. I don't think he ever expected him to throw 47 passes with that defense and running game that just isn't working right now. So Tua, yeah, he's a great option this week. It will be interesting. The only thing that does worry me is that they played in London last week, and they're one of the few teams that don't get a bye coming after. Will there be any jet lag? Will there be any, out of rhythmness? We'll have to wait and see. But the matchup says you can start Tua, and Tua's not the only quarterback in that matchup you can start. I just mentioned how bad the Miami Dolphins defense has been, which has been one of the biggest shocks. Now I know they were missing both starters at corner. They're missing a ton of pieces. They're hurting, and I get it. And Matt Ryan's coming off a bye week. Again, not a guy a couple years ago, you would love to start Matt Ryan. This year, it's not so much. But if both corners can't go, they've been susceptible to the run game, the pass game. Matt Ryan, it's another plus matchup for the quarterback. This could finally be the Calvin Ridley over 100-yard game.
because he is
Like,
back. That's worth noting too.
Calvin Ridley's back. Kyle Pitts had his breakout game in London the week prior. Cordero Patterson's still there. Mike Davis didn't look bad. Like, this team is slowly coming along. It's slowly starting to seem like they're buying into the Arthur Smith passing option. I do like Matt Ryan in week 7. And again, there's a lot of quarterbacks that aren't going to be playing. It's going to be hard to grab a guy like Matt Ryan on your waivers. But if he's out there, go do it.
And then there's one guy who is a big maybe in case maybe you can't get all three of these guys. Somebody to look at in case he ends up starting would have to be Trey Lance. Now, we don't know the situation because he's banged up. He had a little bit of a knee issue. Jimmy Garoppolo is also banged up. He may play, may not. So don't go out there and just blindly play Trey Lance. Watch the injury report, see what happens. If he does play, he bookmarks a whole lot like a Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts has played some very poor games this season, and yet he always seems to put up at least 20 fantasy points because he can throw for 150 yards but run for almost 100 and a touchdown also. So Trey Lance is almost one of those guys that you're starting almost every week that he played just because of his ability on the ground being a fantasy cheat code.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Jalen Hurts had a 46% completion percentage, 12 for 26, and threw for 115 yards in week 6 against the Buccaneers and put up 25 fantasy points because of what he did on the ground.
Yeah, exactly. 2
I
rushing
think,
touchdowns, like, it just happens every week, and Trey Lance
yeah,
is no different.
we all running quarterbacks is a cheat code for fantasy football. And like George mentioned, we're not even sure Trey Lance is going to start. So I'm not telling you to go into this blindly banking on Trey Lance playing. You might want to try to add one of the guys for streaming options, maybe even make it a waiver priority so you get the guy that you want. But if you for some reason miss out on them, maybe they're not available on your waivers and you have to start you can't start Big Ben because he's on bye. But a guy on the same level, Baker Mayfield, he hasn't looked great. He has the shoulder injury. You don't want to play him against Denver on a short week. Understandable. Hopefully by Thursday, you might hear a little bit more details about who might be starting. If Trey Lance is back, Jimmy Garoppolo, you can make the pivot then. That's a little bit tougher because it is a Thursday matchup. And Kyle Shanahan is notoriously of making you wait. But those are the kind of guys that, like Jared Goff, he's put up some decent fantasy points, but that team
Because 'cause they're
just
playing
isn't
from
very.
behind, yeah.
But I'd rather play Trey Lance than Jared Goff. Just
Yes.
my personal opinion. Because of the running quarterback is a cheat code. So, well, and I just said Jalen Hurts, but I'm talking about Trey Lance. I mean, you'd obviously play Jalen Hurts over Jared Goff, but I'm talking about Trey Lance. I think it could be a good week for him. And again, and I'm saying all this, and he's probably won't even play. He'll probably beat Jimmy Garoppolo. But if he does play, I think you can squeeze right into your lineup against the Indianapolis Colts. But before we hit the Thursday night preview game, let's talk a few defenses, and I'll let you take over the first one. I've been talking a long time.
All right, I'm actually going to start us off here with the New England Patriots who are facing the New York Jets. So, the Patriots defense was good 2 years ago, was bad last year. We kind of discounted them. They're coming back into their own a little bit. They're actually a top 10 fantasy defense right now. And everything about the Jets this year, as much as they're playing better than last year, still says play the New England Patriots. So they're owned in a lot of leagues right now. A lot of people dropped them when they were facing the Cowboys because of that high-powered offense, because a lot of people stream defenses. If they're available, go out there and grab them. There may be a defense you keep a little bit longer term, but obviously you're not going to play their defense in every matchup.
Yeah, and I'm going to go back to the Thursday night matchup for a defense you can stream, and that's the Cleveland Browns. This defense is still very good on paper. They were probably cut because they put up a 0-point performance against the Chargers 2 weeks ago, and they put up a negative 2-point performance against the Arizona Cardinals last week. Now, I understand. Why are you saying pick a defense that has scored negative 2 points in the last 2 weeks? I get it. It might be a little bit tough to swallow, but they're playing Denver. They're hosting Denver. The home team always has the advantage on Thursday night football. Denver has come back to earth a little bit. This Cleveland defense is still a good defense. They can still get sacks. They still have Myles Garrett. They still have Jadeveon Clowney. This will be a much low scoring game. It's not a high powered offense coming out of Denver. There's some people that are saying that the head coach, even at 3-3, head coach is on the hot seat. There was fire Shermer stuff, their offensive coordinator going throughout the stands. Like, people are not happy with the Denver offense. Cleveland, it's a good matchup. They're most likely available because they've had two poor matchups the last 2 weeks. Go out and add them and start them with confidence.
Definitely. I'm going to move on to a team who is another top 10 defense and a team that I am actually confident starting the next 3 weeks. So go ahead and make a priority if you want someone that'll start a little longer term. Carolina Panthers. So this week they got the New York Giants. We all know the New York Giants offense is struggling and they're so banged up. They probably lost Kadarius Toney for multiple weeks. They're basically down to Sterling Shepard. So they got the Giants this week. Carolina then faces Atlanta in 2 weeks and New England following that. So that's a defense that's already the 9th-ranked defense that you could play the next 3 weeks, and then you have to worry about a defense after that. So there could be a longer term fill there as Carolina.
Yeah, I like that one a lot. I think Now, I will say Carolina, I'm a little disappointed in after their 3-0 start that they're now sitting at 3-3. They did give up over 570 yards to the high. I don't even know if I want to say high-powered Vikings offense. But they kept that game close,
And
and it
scored a
is
defensive touchdown, so they got 7 fantasy points.
well, there you go. I mean,
Yeah.
they're still a solid team that you should feel good about playing, especially against the Giants, who looked
Mhm.
abysmal against who do they even play this past week? I know they didn't.
Minnesota, and then Philly before that.
Yeah, so I mean, they haven't looked good. I like that pick, and then the last one I'm gonna give to you is the New Orleans Saints. They get to play the Seattle Seahawks on Monday Night Football, and the Seahawks, or I'm sorry, excuse me, the Saints are owned in about 60% of leagues, so this one might be a little bit harder to get as a streaming defense, but there's still 40% of leagues out there that they're available. They were cut because of previous matchups, haven't looked the best, but they get to play Seattle, and more importantly, they get to play Geno Smith. This isn't the Russell Wilson Seattle Seahawks. This is the Geno Smith Seattle Seahawks. They're having issues at running back. Their wide receivers have been contained the last few weeks. The Saints, if you're available to get them, I do like them a lot. One of my favorite options, obviously, that's why they're owned more than any of the other defenses we mentioned. But Seattle, and it'll be in Seattle. That's what I'm trying to say. In Seattle, so it's always a tough place to play. But the Saints defense on Monday night against a team filled with injuries and just honestly isn't that great right now. So again, if one of the 40% of leagues that can go out and pick up the Saints, you should do it.
Definitely agree there. I think that wraps up our quarterbacks and defensive streaming options. So why don't we move on to a little quick Thursday night football preview before we wrap it up. Thursday night football this week, as we mentioned, is the Denver Broncos traveling to the Cleveland Browns. We talked a lot on the Cleveland side already in this show, I feel like. But we can hit some of the stuff that we mentioned just to put it up in one little package here. Baker Mayfield's banged up but should play. The running backs, we're not going to have Kareem Hunt. We probably will not have Nick Chubb. So we're looking at
I'd be
most
shocked
likely
if we did.
Demetric Felton. So yeah, we like Demetric Felton to play that as well. And we also have the chance of seeing Dearness Johnson, but I think I like Felton better if you're going to put someone right in your starting lineup. And if there's no Chubb as well, I think there's no absolute confidence for me to play Felton this week.
For sure. If both Chubb and Hunt are out there, I think Felton is a fine play this week. A guy that you can start with pretty much confidence, especially with all the buys. The one guy I do want to ask about is this is going to sound a little bit like chasing fantasy points, which we often advise not to. But Odell Beckham just hasn't been putting up the points. But the guy Baker seems to going to trusting and has looked good is Donovan Peoples-Jones. I, we're, there's like 10 receivers that would start every week in fantasy between the Vikings, Chargers, and Cowboys that aren't aren't there this week, and that doesn't even include the Bills. Like, so there's a lot of wide receiver openings this week. Is Donovan Peoples Jones interest you at all? Are you looking elsewhere? Where's your thoughts on them? And it is worth noting that uh, I believe Jarvis Landry is eligible to come back. My guess, again, not a doctor, is that they will hold him and give him the full extra 10 days against the Broncos. That's just my guess going into it. I haven't heard anything officially at this time. But that is my guess. So it looks like Donovan Peoples-Jones and Odell Beckham Jr. will be your starting wide receivers on Thursday night.
You kind of took the words right out of my mouth because what I was going to say is if Jarvis Landry comes back, which I do not expect, I do not like Donovan Peoples Jones. It would be a chasing fantasy point scenario. Because I don't expect Jarvis Landry to return because it's a short week, I like Donovan Peoples Jones because you're so desperate at wide receiver with all those big weapons out this week. The only thing I'm kind of scared of is he's a little bit of a low volume guy. I believe he's getting about 6 targets a week, but he's just out there making big plays. And Denver is not a horrible matchup. So I'm confident because you just need to go out there and try to find fantasy points somewhere. Donovan Peoples Jones is not a bad play.
Alrighty, well, I think that's enough for the Cleveland Browns. Let's pivot over to Teddy Bridgewater and the Denver Broncos. Not a great matchup if you need a streaming option for Teddy Bridgewater. I would avoid that one. I do got to ask about the wide receivers, though. Jerry Jeudy can come back. He's 50-50 is what I heard if he'll play. Again, it's another guy I just think they'll they know they have 10 days coming up. If he's out there, it'll be for a few snaps just to get him back into the game flow. I don't expect him to be out there much. So are you still confident starting Tim Patrick, Cortland Sutton, with no Jerry Jeudy? And then of course you're starting Noah Fant, but we didn't
Yeah, of
need to
course
really
you're
mention
starting
that one.
Noah Fant. Um, I think I'm slightly more confident in Cortland Sutton, but I think I'm probably confident playing both him and Tim Patrick. Tim Patrick's just been a model of consistency kind of guy until Jerry Jeudy gets back. After that, I think it's going to be a question mark because he's going to lose snaps.
For
But
sure.
no, I mean for now, I think especially in a deep buy situation, I would go out there and play Cortland Sutton and Tim Patrick.
And last thing about the Denver Broncos, I have to ask: Melvin Gordon, Javonte
Nope.
Williams. No, none of them.
No. I just hate this question because of how much of a split there is, but they're getting them volume, and I hate to sound like because or because of bye weeks, because of injuries. I don't hate playing either. And I don't even want to. I feel like I'm just sounding like, oh, just go out there and play anybody because everyone's hurt. It's not the case. I mean, we're trying to name some good options for you, and both of them have been very effective. But I don't feel bad playing either Broncos running back. I just wish there was more than a 50-50 split, but we're basically right down the middle at this point.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty incredible on how close these. Like Melvin Gordon has 70 attempts on the year. Javonte Williams has 65. Melvin Gordon has 332 yards. Javonte Williams has 300.
Oh my
Melvin Gordon has
gosh.
16 targets. Javonte Williams has 15 targets.
And it's not even like it's a situation like the Bills where the Bills have Zach Moss and Devin Singletary basically splitting 50-50. But like where they're getting the carries is a difference. Like Zach Moss is getting touchdowns because he's getting red zone touches, that kind of thing. So he's definitely by far the better play. Like these guys, I feel like they're both playing everywhere. They're both getting the same amount of touches. They're both getting the same amount of work, like, same quality of work. It's just I don't know if they're going to be consistent, go play them, but you're not going to get a boom week out of either of them, most likely. You're just going to get one of those solid 10-point fantasy football running back weeks.
Yeah, I'm not a huge. I'm not because of the defense, the short week. I'm not a huge fan of playing either of these guys this week. Hopefully, you could have picked up, a Darrell Williams or Damian Williams over the last few weeks, and you got to play one of those guys. But if you have to, like George mentioned, at least they're seeing about 50% of the work each. You're going to hope that one of them gets into the end zone. That's what you're pretty much banking on. And again, it's bipocalypse has started, and essentially, you might have to, and there's not much you can do elsewise. And it's not the worst play. Let's just put it that way. It's not a
No.
play you're going to feel great about. You're not going to be like, oh yeah, I get to play Melvin Gordon this week. Nope, that's not going to be. You're like, oh man, I got to play Melvin Gordon this week. Then he's going to score a touchdown. Be like, I was always playing Melvin Gordon this week. What you talking about? That's how fantasy goes. Hey, I'm talking to everybody listening because that's exactly how it goes on Sunday. You're like, or you're going to not play him and he's going to score and be like, oh man, I tried to set my lineup at 12:59, and you know what? Or I guess it's a Thursday night game. I tried to set my lineup at 7:59, and at 8 o'clock they locked, and it's like, did you
Yep.
really? But
Hmm.
like, there's just so many question marks. with injuries, that's the other thing. It's so tough because it's a Thursday night game that, like, I feel like if I'm gonna hold out hope for one of the guys that might be questionable going into Sunday, and I'm either gonna love that decision or I'm gonna regret that decision because then I'm gonna be stuck playing Devin Singletary. The other
But
well,
you're
no, I'm
not
not
because
'cause
he's also
he's
on
on
bye.
bye. I can't. There's too many people on bye this week.
So you own Nick Chubb and you miss out on Demetric Felton and Dearness Johnson. You can go out there and play Melvin Gordon because at that point you're not waiting until Sunday to see if anyone plays. You know Nick Chubb's not playing. That kind of idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. Would you rather play Melvin Gordon or Alex Collins? One's playing Thursday, one's playing Monday.
Honestly, because I feel like I've actually had this situation in the league. I played Alex Collins last week, and I would probably play Alex Collins again this week.
Yeah, but then Alex Collins is also, a little questionable. You gotta wait and like,
So you go out
it's
there and get Rashad Penny and hope maybe. Like
yeah,
I feel like we're playing chess with the injury report. And like we're not even playing chess with our other like owners in our fantasy leagues anymore. We're playing chess with the injury report.
for real. This is why I drafted the no running back strategy, and, you can't be mad
Oh,
about
don't
running
go out
back
there and
injuries
be
when
a
you don't
truther
have any.
about that now. You were so mad at yourself for going zero running back at the beginning of the year, and now you're trying to sit back like, oh, I knew this was gonna happen.
I was pretty mad at myself, but I also lucked into going no running back strategy and still grabbing Darrell Henderson and DeAndre Swift in rounds 4 and 5. So I know it's early, but it looks like that was a saving. I mean, I also grabbed Miles Gaskin and what I don't remember the exact order of those three. That was my next. I went no running backs, then all running backs. That's just how I was like, oh, I probably should not. And luckily, so far, I've hit on 1.5 of them. So I'll take that. But I think that's enough talking about Thursday night football. It doesn't sound like a great matchup, but I'm sure all the primetime matchups so far this year have been really good. Even the Eagles last Thursday night looked awful.
It was
No
good for a
offense.
quarter.
Awful. And the next thing I know, it was 20-28. And we're like, and the Eagles needed one stop and they could have went down to tie the game. It was like, where did this come
Won
from?
the game because they went for 2.
Oh, that's right. They could have won because
Yeah.
what was the score?
28-22 because they went for 2 on
20-22,
that third
yeah.
touchdown. Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot. I was like, where am I missing points? But it's 28-22. Yeah, so all the Thursday night games are going to be good. This one's going to be hopefully a decent one. A lot of question marks surrounding this matchup and throughout the league. So definitely make sure you are staying tuned in to thecouchgms.com. You can follow the Couch GMs over on Twitter, on Facebook. We're posting updates, retweets, making sure we have all the news in one location for you. Just want to say thanks again for listening to another episode of the Couch GMs podcast. Tyler will be back soon. He has switched jobs. So has George. It is making the availability for all three of us very difficult. He misses you guys, and he wants me to tell you this podcast is more fun for you and more fun for us when you get involved.
Yes, guys, make sure you join us later in the week when we break down Week 7 with our Week 7 fantasy preview and give you all the news you need to know for the injuries, anyone who can fill in for bye weeks, all of that. For Cody Roadcap and somewhere out there, Tyler Snyder, I'm George Kerth. We'll see you all later this week.